Let me tell you about the time a group of power-hungry HOA members tried to bulldoze my third-generation family farm to build their fancy new clubhouse. And I wasn't even part of their association. I still can't believe their audacity, showing up with construction equipment like they owned the place. This story still makes my blood boil years later, but trust me, they learned a hard lesson about messing with a farmer's legacy. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and notification bell to catch more stories of standing up against injustice. Now let me take you back to where it all began. My name's Michael Anderson, but everyone around here just calls me Mike. I've lived on this 180-acre farm in central Pennsylvania my whole life, and I wouldn't have it any other way. This land has been in my family since 1934, when my grandfather, Robert, bought it during the tail end of the Great Depression. He used his life savings and a loan from his brother to purchase what was then just an overgrown plot with a weathered old barn and a tiny farmhouse that had seen better days. I still remember the stories my grandfather used to tell me about. Those early years, he'd sit on the front porch in his favorite rocking chair, point to different parts of the property, and share how each field was cleared by hand, how every stone wall was built piece by piece. This land, he'd say, it's got our blood, sweat, and tears in every inch of soil. He wasn't exaggerating. My grandfather and father transformed this place into one of the most productive organic farms in Chester County. Growing up here taught me lessons you can't learn from any book. By age 7, I could tell you exactly when the first frost would hit just by the smell in the air. By 10, I knew how to repair a tractor engine alongside my dad, David. He always said, a farmer who can't fix his own equipment might as well be trying to plow with a toothpick. Those words stuck with me, just like everything else he taught me about respecting the land and the importance of hard work. Our farm specializes in organic vegetables and heritage grain varieties. We've got fields of ancient grains like einkorn and emmer wheat that you won't find anywhere else in the county. Local restaurants and artisanal bakeries can't get enough of our produce, and we've built a reputation for quality that brings people from 3 states over to our weekend farmers market. I took over running the farm when Dad retired 10 years ago. He still lives in the original farmhouse with Mom, while my wife Sarah and I built a new home on the eastern edge of the property. Our kids, Emma and James, are the 4th generation to grow up here. Emma's already showing signs of having that farmer's instinct. At 12, she can name every variety of tomato we grow and knows exactly when each one needs harvesting. James, though only 9, has practically turned our greenhouse into his personal science lab, experimenting with different growing techniques. The farm isn't just a business, it's our heritage. Every morning when I walk out at dawn and see the sun rising over our fields, I feel connected to something bigger than myself. I see my grandfather's dreams in the old barn he built, my father's wisdom in the irrigation systems he designed, and my own contributions in the organic certification we earned 5 years ago. This place tells the story of 3 generations of Andersons, and I always thought nothing could threaten that legacy. Life here was peaceful and predictable until about 2 years ago. That's when Sterling Heights, this fancy suburban development, started sprouting up on the land adjacent to our eastern border. I didn't think much of it at first. Development's been creeping closer to family farms all over the county, and I figured we could coexist just fine. The houses they built were all identical beige McMansions with perfectly manicured lawns, about as different from our working farm as you could imagine, but live and let live, right? The Sterling Heights Homeowners Association formed pretty much as soon as people started moving in. They elected this woman named Patricia Reynolds as their president, a retired corporate executive who seemed to think running an HOA was the same as running a Fortune 500 company. At first, they kept to themselves, mostly focused on enforcing their own rules about lawn maintenance and approved paint colors. I actually found it kind of amusing, watching them measure grass height with rulers and debate the acceptable shades of beige for their facades. Little did I know that Patricia and her HOA board had bigger plans that would put them on a collision course with our farm and trigger a battle that would shake our entire community. But that's where this story really begins. And believe me, you won't believe what these HOA folks tried to pull. If you want to hear how this all played out, and trust me, it gets wild, make sure you're subscribed and have those notifications turned on. Drop a comment below if you've ever dealt with an HOA trying to overstep their bounds. I'd love to hear your stories too. The first signs of trouble started innocently enough. It was early spring, right when we were preparing our fields for planting. I noticed more and more Sterling Heights residents walking along the fence line between our properties, pointing at our farm equipment and taking pictures on their phones. At first, I thought they were just curious about farming. You'd be surprised how many city folks have never seen a working farm up close. But then the whispers started. Sarah would come back from the grocery store with stories about overhearing Sterling Heights residents complaining about our industrial equipment, ruining their views. Our organic certification signs, which we're proud to display, were suddenly being called unsightly commercial advertising by HOA members. Even our historic red barn, which has stood since my grandfather's time, was labeled an aesthetic concern in their community newsletter. I tried to be neighborly about it all when Patricia Reynolds, the HOA president, stopped by one afternoon in her spotless white Mercedes. I invited her in for coffee. She declined, standing at our front gate in her designer suit like she was afraid to get dirt on her shoes. Instead, she handed me a thick envelope and said, "We need to discuss the future of this area, Mr. Anderson." Inside that envelope was a glossy brochure outlining Sterling Heights' Community Enhancement Initiative. My jaw nearly hit the floor when I saw what they had planned. They wanted to expand their development, adding a massive community center with tennis courts, a pool, and what they called a modern event space. The kicker: their proposed location for this project included 15 acres of my farm, specifically the eastern section where we grow our most profitable heritage, grains. "This is my property," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I'm not selling, and I'm certainly not part of your HOA." Patricia gave me this condescending smile that I'll never forget. "Mr. Anderson," she said, "progress is inevitable. Your agricultural activities are significantly impacting our property values. We're prepared to offer you fair market value for that portion of land. It would be in everyone's best interest to cooperate." I handed the brochure back to her. "Not interested. This farm has been in my family for 3 generations, and it's staying that way." She didn't take the brochure. Instead, she left it on our gatepost along with her business card. "Think about it," she said. "Change is coming to this area whether you like it or not. Better to be part of the process than stand in its way." After she left, I called my old friend Mark Thompson, who's been our family's lawyer since my father's time. I explained the situation, and he assured me they had no legal grounds to force a sale. "They're probably used to throwing their weight around within their development," he said, "but they have zero authority over your farm. Keep documenting everything, though. Something tells me they won't take no for an answer." Mark was right. Within a week, signs started appearing along the Sterling Heights side of our shared border: future home of Sterling Heights Community Center, and coming soon, luxury event space. They were positioned to face our farm, like they were trying to stake their claim. Then came the letters, not just to me, but to the county zoning board, the agricultural board, and even the historical society. The HOA claimed our farm was a nuisance property that posed health and safety risks to their community. They complained about everything from the early morning noise of our tractors to the organic fertilizers we use. They even tried to argue that our farm violated some obscure county ordinance about commercial activities in residential zones, completely ignoring the fact that our agricultural zoning predated their development by nearly a century. The situation got even more tense when Sterling Heights residents started calling the police about our normal farming activities. One morning, Officer Jenkins showed up because someone had reported suspicious machinery operation. I was just harvesting wheat with our combine. Another time, they called in a complaint about unauthorized construction when we were repairing the irrigation system. Each time, the police were apologetic. Officer Jenkins actually grew up on a farm himself and couldn't believe the complaints he had to respond to. "These city folks move out here for the rural charm," he said, shaking his head, "then try to change everything that makes it rural." But the real shock came during our annual Farm to Table festival.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
We've been hosting this event for the past decade, inviting local chefs and families to see where their food comes from. It's usually one of our best weekends of the year. This time, Patricia and her HOA board members showed up with a film crew and a surveyor. While families were enjoying hay rides and chef demonstrations, they walked along our eastern border, taking measurements and filming our property. The surveyor planted stakes with orange flags in several spots, all well within our property line. When I confronted them, Patricia smiled that same condescending smile. "We're just conducting a preliminary site survey," she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Our architects need accurate measurements for the community center plans." I pulled the stakes out of the ground one by one. "This is private property. You're trespassing, and if you don't leave immediately, I'm calling the police." "That won't be necessary," Patricia replied, though her smile had turned cold. "We already have what we need. I do hope you'll reconsider our offer, Mr. Anderson. Things could become complicated if you continue to be uncooperative." That night, after all our festival guests had gone home, Sarah and I sat on the porch, trying to make sense of it all. "They can't really think they can just take our land, can they?" she asked, worried. I squeezed her hand. "No, they can't, but something tells me they're going to try." Looking out over our fields in the twilight, I could see the lights of Sterling Heights glowing beyond our property line. Each one of those houses represented someone who'd bought into Patricia's vision of suburban perfection. But this was our land, our legacy, and if they thought we'd give it up without a fight, they had another thing coming. The real shock came one Monday morning in early June. I was out checking our tomato fields when I heard the unmistakable sound of heavy machinery coming from our eastern border. At first I thought maybe Sterling Heights was doing some landscaping work on their side of the property line, but as I got closer, my heart nearly stopped. There was a full-size bulldozer parked on my land, along with 2 construction trucks and a group of people in hard hats looking at blueprints spread across a pickup truck's hood. Patricia Reynolds was there, of course, wearing a yellow hard hat that looked like it had never seen a day of actual work. She was pointing at different areas of our field, talking to a man in a suit who kept nodding and making notes on a tablet. What made my blood really boil was seeing the Sterling Construction LLC logos on the trucks. They weren't just trespassing. They were actually planning to start construction on my farm without my permission. I grabbed my phone and immediately started recording as I approached them. "What exactly do you think you're doing on my property?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. Patricia turned, giving me that same condescending smile I'd grown to hate. "Ah, Mr. Anderson. Good morning. We're just conducting a preliminary site assessment. The architectural team needs to evaluate the ground conditions for the community center foundation. The hell you are, I said, continuing to record. This is private property. You have no right to be here, and you certainly have no right to bring heavy equipment onto my land. The man in the suit stepped forward, extending his hand. Robert, Wigner, Sterling Heights Development Corporation. We've filed all the necessary paperwork with the county for this project. Perhaps you didn't receive the notices. I ignored his hand. What notices? This is my land. I haven't agreed to any project, and I haven't received any legitimate notices about construction. Actually, Patricia interjected, pulling out a folder from her designer briefcase. We sent multiple notices to your address regarding the community enhancement project. Your failure to respond within the specified time frame has been taken as tacit acceptance of the development plans. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Tacit acceptance! This is private property that's been in my family for generations. You can't just decide to build on it because I didn't respond to your made-up notices. That's when I noticed Emma, my daughter, had come up behind me on her bike. She must have heard the commotion from where she was collecting eggs in the chicken coop. Her face showed a mix of confusion and fear as she watched the bulldozer sitting idle in our heritage wheat field. "Dad," she called out, her voice shaking slightly, "are they going to destroy our farm?" "No, honey," I assured her, my resolve strengthening at the sight of her worried face. "They're leaving. Right now." I turned back to Patricia and her crew. "You have exactly 5 minutes to get your equipment off my property before I call the police." Patricia's smile finally faltered. "Mr. Anderson, be reasonable. This project is going forward, whether you like it or not. The HOA board has unanimously approved it, and we have investors waiting. Your outdated farming operation is standing in the way of progress." 3 minutes now, I replied, already dialing Officer Jenkins's number on my phone. "And keep the cameras rolling, Emma. We want to document everything." The construction workers started looking uncomfortable, glancing between Patricia and their equipment. One of them, an older man with grey hair showing under his hard hat, stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said to Patricia, "you assured us all the permissions were in order. I ain't working on disputed property. That's asking for trouble." Patricia's face reddened. "The permissions are in order. Mr. Anderson is simply being difficult. We have every right to—" She was cut off by the arrival of 2 police cars, their lights flashing. Officer Jenkins stepped out of the first one, taking in the scene with a frown. I'd texted him photos while waiting for them to arrive, so he already had an idea of what was happening. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority, "would you like to explain why you have construction equipment on the Anderson farm without the owner's permission?" Patricia tried to maintain her composure, but I could see cracks in her corporate facade. "Officer, we have filed all the necessary paperwork for this development project. Mr. Anderson was given ample notice. Filing paperwork doesn't give you the right to enter private property or bring equipment onto it without the owner's consent," Officer Jenkins interrupted. "I'm going to need to see these notices you claim to have sent, along with any permits you've obtained." While Patricia fumbled through her briefcase, pulling out various documents, I noticed Robert Wagner, the Development Corporation guy, quietly slipping away to make a phone call. The construction workers were already heading back to their equipment, clearly wanting no part of this situation. Officer Jenkins reviewed the documents Patricia provided, his frown deepening. "Mrs. Reynolds, these are internal HOA documents and preliminary permit applications. None of these give you any authority to enter Mr. Anderson's property or begin construction work. You're currently trespassing, and if that bulldozer has damaged any crops, you could be looking at additional charges." "This is ridiculous," Patricia snapped, finally losing her cool. "We are trying to improve this community, to raise property values, and provide amenities that will benefit everyone. Mr. Anderson's refusal to cooperate is harming the entire neighborhood." "The only harm being done here is by you and your unauthorized construction crew," I said. "Officer Jenkins, I want to press charges for trespassing, and I'll be seeking damages for any crop destruction caused by that equipment." The next hour was a flurry of activity. The construction equipment was carefully removed from our field, leaving deep tracks in the soil where the bulldozer had been parked. Officer Jenkins and his partner took statements from everyone present, including Emma, who did a great job describing how she'd found the crew on our property. As Patricia and her team were finally leaving, she turned back to me. "This isn't over, Mr. Anderson. The community center project will proceed. You're standing in the way of progress, and progress always wins." "No, Patricia," I replied, my voice firm. "You're standing in the way of legacy, tradition, and property rights. And I promise you, this fight is just beginning." After they left, Emma helped me document the damage to our wheat field. The bulldozer had compacted the soil in several spots, and we'd definitely lost a portion of this year's crop. But looking at my daughter's determined face as she photographed the damage, I felt a surge of pride. She understood what we were fighting for, not just our farm, but the principles it represented. That evening, I called an emergency family meeting. Sarah, my parents, and the kids all gathered in the old farmhouse kitchen. I showed them the video and photos from the morning's confrontation. "They really thought they could just take our land?" Emma asked, still in disbelief. "Sometimes people with money and power think they can do whatever they want," my father said, his voice heavy with decades of farming wisdom. "But they forgot one thing. Farmers don't give up easily." "So what do we do now?" Sarah asked, squeezing my hand under the table. "Now," I said, "we fight back. The right way, with the law on our side." Little did I know, this brazen attempt at land grabbing was just the beginning. The HOA's next moves would test our family's resolve in ways we never imagined, but we were ready for them. Or at least, we thought we were. After the bulldozer incident, I knew we needed serious legal help. Mark Thompson, our family lawyer, is great for routine farm business, but we needed someone who specialized in property rights and fighting aggressive development. Fortunately, Mark knew just the person, Jennifer Martinez, one of the top land use attorneys in the state. Jennifer agreed to meet us the next morning at our farm. She showed up at dawn, dressed in a suit but wearing practical boots, a good sign that she understood what she was dealing with. We walked the property while I showed her the damage from the bulldozer and explained everything that had happened with Sterling Heights HOA. "They've made some serious mistakes," Jennifer said, taking photos of the damaged wheat field. "Bringing construction equipment onto private property without permission? That's not just trespassing, it's willful property damage. And these fake notices they claim to have sent, that could constitute mail fraud if they're lying about them." We settled into my office, really just a corner of our barn that I'd converted for paperwork. Jennifer spread out all our documents, including the photos and videos from yesterday's confrontation. She was particularly interested in the folder Patricia had shown us with their so-called notices. "Look at this," she said, pointing to the letterhead. "Sterling Heights Development Corporation." But when I checked county records this morning, this corporation was only formed 3 weeks ago. They're trying to create the appearance of official authority where none exists. That's when she dropped the real bombshell. I did some digging into Patricia Reynolds and Robert Wagner. They're not just HOA president and developer, they're business partners. They've pulled this same stunt in 3 other counties, using HOAs to pressure landowners into selling below market value, then flipping the properties for massive profits. My blood boiled hearing this. "So this isn't even about a community center, it's just a land grab?" "Exactly," Jennifer replied. "They're probably planning to build luxury homes once they get the land. The community center is just a cover story to make it seem like it's for the public good." We spent the next few hours developing our strategy. Jennifer recommended filing for an immediate injunction to prevent any further attempts at construction, plus a civil suit for damages. But she also suggested something more aggressive, a RICO case. Racketeering? I asked, surprised. Isn't that for taking down mob bosses? Jennifer smiled. RICO applies to any pattern of organized criminal activity. If we can prove Patricia and Wagner have done this before, using HOAs as weapons to force land sales, that's a pattern. And given their corporate connection, we could argue criminal conspiracy. While we were talking, Sarah came in with some interesting news. She'd been on the phone with other farmers in the county and discovered we weren't the only ones being targeted. 2 other family farms bordering Sterling Heights had received similar notices about upcoming development projects. "This is perfect," Jennifer said. "Multiple targets strengthen our RICO case. Plus, we can file a class action on behalf of all affected landowners." She started drafting the legal paperwork right there in our barn office. I've never seen anyone work so fast, her fingers flying over her laptop keyboard while simultaneously consulting thick law books she'd brought with her. "The key," she explained, "is to hit them hard and fast from multiple angles. We'll file the injunction first thing tomorrow morning. I want them served before they can try anything else with that bulldozer." Around lunchtime, Officer Jenkins stopped by to give us copies of the police report from yesterday. He'd also brought something interesting, dash cam footage from his patrol car showing Patricia admitting they hadn't obtained proper permits. "This might help your case," he said with a knowing smile. "And just so you know, we've posted extra patrols around the farm. Any more construction equipment shows up, we'll know about it." Jennifer was ecstatic about the dash cam footage. "This is gold," she said. "Clear evidence they knew they were acting without authority." But what really got her attention was something Emma had noticed. "Remember those photos she took of the damage? My 12-year-old daughter, sharp as ever, had captured something in the background of one shot, Robert Wagner on his phone, standing next to a building plan that clearly showed not a community center, but a layout for luxury condominiums." "Emma," Jennifer said, "you might have just given us the smoking gun. This proves they're misrepresenting their true intentions to the community." We spent the afternoon gathering more evidence. My dad brought out all our original property documents dating back to 1934. Jennifer confirmed our agricultural zoning was ironclad and predated any current development regulations by decades. "They can't just rezone this land without your consent," she explained, "and given its historical agricultural use, any attempt to force rezoning would face severe scrutiny from the State Agricultural Board." Around dinner time, Jennifer laid out our full legal strategy. First, an emergency injunction to prevent any further trespassing or construction attempts. Second, a civil suit for damages from the bulldozer incident. Third, a RICO case against Patricia, Wagner, and their development corporation. Finally, a class action on behalf of all targeted farmers in the area. "Here's the best part," she said. "Under RICO, if we win, any damages are automatically tripled. Plus, they'll be on the hook for all legal fees." Just as we were wrapping up, we got an unexpected visitor, one of the construction workers from yesterday. The older man with the grey hair who'd spoken up about not working on disputed property. "Name's Frank," he said, shifting uncomfortably. "We've been in construction 40 years, never seen anything like what they're trying to pull here." He handed us a USB drive. "Thought you might want copies of the real building plans. What they showed you folks ain't what they showed us workers." Jennifer practically jumped out of her chair to look at the files. Sure enough, the USB contained detailed plans for a luxury housing development, no community center in sight. "Frank," she said, "would you be willing to testify about this?" He nodded. "Been thinking about retiring anyway. Might as well go out doing the right thing." That evening, after Jennifer left with a trunk full of evidence and Frank's USB drive, our family sat down to dinner together. The mood was different from yesterday's worried gathering. There was hope now and determination. "So we've got a real chance at stopping them?" Emma asked. "More than a chance," I replied. "We've got the truth on our side, and now we've got the legal muscle to back it up. And we've got something else they don't have," my father added. "Community. Real community, not their fake HOA version." He was right. Throughout the day, neighbors had been stopping by. Real farmers, people who'd known our family for generations. Each one offered support, whether it was testament about our farm's history or just a promise to stand with us. Looking around, our dinner table, I felt stronger than ever about our fight. This wasn't just about protecting our farm anymore. It was about standing up to bullies who thought they could steal people's heritage with fake documents and bulldozers. The next morning started early, really early. I was up before dawn, checking on our irrigation system, when I spotted lights moving along our eastern border. Not flashlights, but the kind of powerful floodlights you'd see on a construction site. My heart nearly stopped when I saw what was causing them. 3 massive bulldozers, escorted by several black SUVs, rolling toward our farm from the Sterling Heights access road. I immediately hit the emergency group text we'd set up. One message that went to Jennifer, Officer Jenkins, my family, and several neighboring farmers. Within minutes, my phone was buzzing with responses. Jennifer was already on her way, and Officer Jenkins had dispatched units. But the cavalry might not arrive in time. Patricia Reynolds stepped out of the lead SUV, followed by Robert Wagner, and what looked like a private security team, burly guys in black tactical gear. They had Sterling Security emblazoned across their backs like some kind of corporate paramilitary unit. "Mr. Anderson," Patricia called out, her voice carrying across the pre-dawn darkness. "We've given you ample opportunity to cooperate. Now we're proceeding with our development plans, with or without your approval." I was already recording on my phone as I approached them, keeping a safe distance. "You're trespassing, Patricia. We've got an emergency injunction hearing in 3 hours. You know that. Can't trespass on property that's been legally acquired," Wagner said, waving a document. "We filed eminent domain proceedings last night. This land has been requisitioned for community development." My blood ran cold, but I remembered what Jennifer had told me about their tactics. "You don't have eminent domain authority. You're a private corporation, not a government entity." "Actually," Patricia smiled, "Sterling Heights Development. Corporation has been granted special development authority by the county board. It's all perfectly legal." She handed me a stack of official-looking papers. "You have 30 minutes to remove any personal property from the development zone. After that, we begin site preparation." I was scanning the documents when I heard the rumble of engines, but not from their bulldozers. Coming up our main access road was a convoy of farm trucks and tractors. Word had spread fast, and our neighbors were showing up in force. Recognized Bill Johnson's rusty F-250, Mary Chen's tractor, and at least a dozen other vehicles belonging to local farmers. They formed a line between our wheat field and the bulldozers, engines idling. Bill stepped out of his truck, shotgun casually resting in the crook of his arm. "Morning, Mike," he called out. "Thought you might want some help with the harvest today." More vehicles were arriving every minute. Sarah had gotten our kids to safety at my parents' house, but she returned with our own tractor, parking it right in the line. Some of our regular customers from the farmers' market had heard what was happening and showed up too, many of them filming on their phones. Patricia's cool demeanor cracked slightly. "This is absurd. We have legal authority to proceed. If these people don't disperse immediately, we'll have them arrested for interfering with a permitted development project." That's when Jennifer's Tesla came flying up the dirt road, kicking up dust. She jumped out, legal briefcase in hand, looking ready for war. "Legal authority?" she called out, striding toward Patricia. "You mean this fraudulent eminent domain claim?" She held up her phone. "I just got off the phone with Judge Harrison. There's no record of any special development authority being granted to your corporation. In fact, he's very interested in how you obtained county letterhead for these fake documents. Wagner's face went pale. He pulled Patricia aside, and they had a heated, whispered conversation. The security team was starting to look uncomfortable, especially with more local news vans showing up. Someone had tipped off the media, and this was quickly becoming a bigger story than they'd planned. Officer Jenkins arrived with 4 patrol cars, lights flashing. Unlike last time, he didn't bother with pleasantries. Mrs. Reynolds, Mr. Wagner, step over here, please. We need to discuss these apparently forged county documents. This is harassment, Patricia snapped, but her voice had lost its confidence. We have every right to commit fraud, Jennifer interrupted. To forge government documents? To trespass with armed security guards? She held up another document. By the way, Sterling Security LLC isn't licensed to operate in this county. Add that to the growing list of charges. The security team leader was apparently listening because he immediately signaled his men to stand down. They quickly retreated to their vehicles, wanting no part of what was unfolding. Wagner tried to salvage the situation. There's been a misunderstanding. We'll postpone the site preparation until we can clarify the paperwork. The only place you're going is to the station, Officer Jenkins said. We need to take formal statements about these forged documents. As Patricia and Wagner were being escorted to police cars, I noticed Emma had arrived with my parents. She was recording everything on her phone, but also taking photographs with her good camera. "Got it all, Dad?" she called out. "Every minute." From when they first showed up, Jennifer said we needed to document everything. I couldn't have been prouder. My 12-year-old daughter had more sense and integrity than these corporate raiders. The bulldozer operators, seeing how things were playing out, started their engines, but only to turn around and leave. One of them gave me a respectful nod as he drove past. They were just workers doing a job. They wanted no part of this mess. As the sun finally rose over our farm, it illuminated an incredible scene. A line of farm equipment and supporters stretching. Along our eastern border, news crews interviewing local farmers, and Jennifer giving a statement about corporate overreach and the importance of protecting family farms. Bill walked over, shotgun now safely stowed in his truck. "You know they'll try something else," he said. "Let them try," I replied. "They don't understand what they're really fighting." "Ain't that the truth?" he chuckled. "They think it's about land and money. They don't get that it's about community, about standing together." The crowd started to disperse as Jennifer confirmed that Patricia and Wagner were being held for questioning about the forged documents. She was heading to the station to make sure all charges were filed properly. "This is a major win," she told me, "but stay alert. People like this, when they're backed into a corner, that's when they're most dangerous." She was right. The next few days would prove just how far Patricia and her crew would go when their plans were thwarted. But for now, watching the sun rise over our wheat field, surrounded by neighbors who'd showed up to defend our farm, I felt something powerful. Hope, mixed with determination. The aftermath of Patricia and Wagner's attempted land grab hit faster than a summer storm. By noon, our farm had become the center of a media circus. Local news vans lined the access road. Reporters were trying to interview everyone in sight, and my phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from bigger news outlets. But what happened next showed us just how deep this conspiracy really went. Jennifer called around 2 p.m. with disturbing news. "And they're out already," she said, her voice tight with anger. "Someone pulled strings at the county level. Not only were they released, but the DA is reviewing whether to file charges about the forged documents." I was in the middle of explaining this to Sarah when we spotted 3 black government-style SUVs pulling up to our farmhouse. But these weren't local police. The vehicles had state markings and outstepped people in suits who looked like they meant business. Mr. Anderson? A tall woman with silver hair approached, showing credentials. I'm Special Agent Diana Collins, State Bureau of Investigation. We need to talk about Sterling Heights Development Corporation and some potentially widespread corruption issues. For the next 3 hours, our farmhouse kitchen became an impromptu investigation headquarters. Agent Collins and her team weren't just interested in the forged documents. They'd been building a case against Patricia Reynolds and Robert Wagner for months. Your farm isn't their first target, Agent Collins explained, spreading files across our kitchen table. We've documented similar attempts in 3 other counties. They find family farms near growing suburban areas, use HOAs as pressure points, and force sales through various illegal means. Then they flip the properties for massive profits. She showed us photos of other farms that had fallen victim to their scheme. In each case, the pattern was similar. Mysterious rezoning approvals, sudden eminent domain claims, and harassment campaigns that made farming operations nearly impossible. But here's where it gets interesting, she continued. The money trail doesn't stop with Reynolds and Wagner. We found connections to several county officials, 2 state representatives, and even a judge. Your case might be what finally helps us break the whole thing open. While we were talking, Jennifer arrived with more news. She'd been digging into Sterling Heights property records and found something shocking. The HOA itself is basically a shell, she explained. Most of the houses are owned by subsidiary companies of Sterling Development. They've been using fake residents to stack HOA votes and create the illusion of community support for their projects. Agent Collins nodded. That matches our findings. We've also discovered that their community center plans have been used. Before, it's always the same story. Promise community benefits, get the land, then suddenly the plans change to luxury housing. Our conversation was interrupted by Sarah rushing in. You need to see this, she said, turning on the kitchen TV. Patricia Reynolds was holding a press conference outside the Sterling Heights clubhouse. This is a clear case of agricultural obstruction, she was saying, looking perfectly composed, despite her earlier arrest. The Anderson farm is standing in the way of vital community development. We have followed all legal procedures and have the full support of local authorities. Agent Collins smiled grimly. She doesn't know we have. Her phone's tapped. Keep watching. Sure enough, minutes later, Patricia made the mistake we'd been waiting for. When asked about the forged documents, she claimed they'd been properly filed with Judge Harrison weeks ago. The same Judge Harrison who had already confirmed to Jennifer that no such filing existed. That's called perjury, Agent Collins said, already typing on her phone. And doing it on live television makes our job much easier. But Patricia wasn't done. She went on to announce that Sterling Heights had filed an emergency petition to have our farm declared a public nuisance due to environmental concerns. She claimed they had evidence of groundwater contamination from our organic farming practices. Jennifer was already on her laptop. They filed the petition 10 minutes ago, she said, with Judge Malcolm. She looked at Agent Collins. Isn't Malcolm one of the judges you mentioned in your investigation? He is, Collins confirmed, and he's about to have a very bad day. We're executing search warrants on several judges' offices tomorrow morning. Malcolm's is first on the list. As if the day couldn't get more intense, Officer Jenkins called. His officers had caught 2 people trying to plant containers of chemicals along our irrigation ditches, containers marked with our farm's name. They were Sterling security employees working under direct orders from Wagner. That's attempted environmental fraud, Agent Collins said, already heading for her car. We need to move on the search warrants now before they can destroy any evidence. Mr. Anderson, we'll need you and your family to stay alert. People like this get desperate when they're cornered. She assigned 2 agents to stay at our farm for protection. Jennifer helped us set up additional security cameras, and our neighbor Bill organized a rotating watch of local farmers. No one was taking any chances. That evening, as things finally quieted down, our family gathered in the living room to process everything. Emma was updating her photo documentation of the whole ordeal, which Agent Collins had praised as better than most professional surveillance. "I don't understand," James said, looking up from his homework. "Why do they want our farm so badly? There's lots of other land they could build on." My father, who'd been quietly listening all day, spoke up. "It's not about the land, son. It's about power. People like that can't stand the idea that something they want might be out of their reach." "But they're breaking the law," Emma protested. "Don't they care about getting caught?" "They think their money and connections will protect them," Sarah explained. "They're not used to people standing up to them." "Well, they picked the wrong family to mess with," Emma declared, showing us her latest photos. She'd captured perfect shots of the security guards trying to plant the chemicals, including clear images of their faces and company badges. Jennifer called one last time before bed. "Tomorrow's going to be intense," she warned. "The state investigation team is coordinating with federal authorities. Apparently, some of the money trail leads across state lines. This could turn into a much bigger case than anyone expected." After we hung up, I walked out onto the porch. The night was clear, stars bright above our fields. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear the familiar sounds of nighttime on a farm, crickets chirping, the occasional lowing of cattle, the rustle of wind through the wheat. This land had survived the Great Depression, multiple droughts, and countless other challenges. Now it was facing a different kind of threat, not from nature, but from human greed. But looking at those stars, the same stars my grandfather would have seen when he first bought this place, I knew we would survive this too. Just when we thought we'd seen every dirty trick in Patricia and Wagner's playbook, they launched a harassment campaign so intense it made their previous attempts look like child's play. It started with something simple. Every single delivery truck suddenly couldn't find our farm address. Our regular suppliers, companies we'd worked with for years, kept calling confused about new routing instructions they'd received. Jennifer traced the problem to a series of fake change of address forms filed with various agencies. Someone had tried to essentially erase our farm from postal and delivery databases, but that was just the beginning. One morning, I woke up to find our farm's entrance blocked by a fleet of broken-down construction vehicles. The drivers all worked for different companies, all claimed mechanical failures, and all insisted they needed to wait for specific repair crews. It took Officer Jenkins and 3 tow trucks to clear the road. "They're trying to choke your business," Agent Collins explained during her daily check-in. "It's a common tactic. If they can't take your land by force, they'll try to make running your farm impossible." The harassment got more sophisticated as the days went on. Our farm's website mysteriously went offline. Our phone lines were flooded with fake orders and bogus complaints. Someone even hacked our social media accounts and posted false claims about food safety violations. Emma, proving herself more tech-savvy than any of us, discovered that all these digital attacks were being routed through a company called Digital Solutions LLC, another shell corporation tied to Sterling Heights development. "Look at this, Dad," she said, showing me her laptop. She'd tracked down corporate registration documents showing Digital Solutions shared an address with 5 other companies, all connected to Wagner's development empire. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. But the real chaos hit during our biggest event of the year, our annual Heritage Grain Festival. We'd been hosting this celebration of traditional farming for the past decade, drawing visitors and artisanal bakers from across the state. This year, someone had other plans. The morning of the festival, we found all the road signs leading to our farm had been removed overnight. Then came the phone calls. Hundreds of people saying they'd received notifications that the festival was cancelled due to health code violations. Someone had mass emailed our entire customer list with fake cancellation notices. Sarah and Emma scrambled to post corrections on social media while I dealt with the health department inspector who'd been sent out based on an anonymous tip. Jennifer was on the phone with the state investigation team, adding these incidents to their growing file of evidence. But our community wasn't having it. Local farmers started posting signs directing people to the festival. Our regular customers spread the word that the cancellation notices were fake. People showed up in record numbers, many saying they came specifically to support us against corporate bullying. The festival was in full swing when Patricia made her move. She arrived with a team of environmental inspectors, not state officials, but private contractors hired by Sterling Heights. They carried elaborate testing equipment and wore hazmat suits, creating a scene that looked like something from a disaster movie. "We have credible reports of soil contamination," Patricia announced loudly, trying to cause panic among our festival guests. "This entire area may be unsafe for public access." That's when Agent Collins stepped in. She'd been mingling with the crowd, keeping an eye on things. "Mrs. Reynolds," she called out, her badge now visible. "Would these be the same kind of credible reports as the falsified environmental data your team tried to plant last week?" The private inspectors, seeing real federal agents approaching, quickly packed up their equipment and left. Patricia tried to maintain her composure, but the damage was done. Festival attendees were filming everything on their phones, and the local news crew that had been covering the festival caught the whole scene. But Patricia had one last card to play. As she was leaving, she handed me another stack of legal papers. "The county zoning board has scheduled an emergency hearing next week," she said with a smirk. "Apparently, there are serious concerns about whether your property is properly zoned for public events. Shame if you had to cancel all your future festivals." Jennifer reviewed the documents immediately. "They're getting sloppy," she said. "These petitions are full of procedural errors. More importantly, look who signed them." She pointed to a name at the bottom, Judge Malcolm, the same judge currently under investigation. That evening, after the festival ended, we had an emergency meeting with Agent Collins and her team. The harassment campaign had revealed new connections in their investigation. Each fake complaint, every fabricated violation, created a paper trail leading back to Sterling Heights and their network of corrupt officials. "They're actually helping us build our case," Agent Collins explained. "Every time they try a new angle, they expose more of their operation. We've identified at least 20 shell companies and dozens of compromised officials." Jennifer added another twist. "The zoning board hearing they're pushing for? It's not just about your farm. They've filed similar petitions against every independent farm within 10 miles of their developments. They're trying to clear the entire area for their projects." "But why now?" Sarah asked. "Why are they pushing so hard when they know they're under investigation?" Agent Collins shared a concerned look with Jennifer. "Because time is running out for them. We've frozen some of their accounts, and their investors are getting nervous. They need to show progress, or their whole house of cards could collapse." That night, unable to sleep, I found Emma sitting on the porch, updating her ever-growing documentation of everything that had happened. "Dad," she said, showing me something on her laptop, "I think I found something weird. All these complaints and inspections, they're not just targeting us. Look at the dates." She had created a timeline of every harassment incident, not just against our farm, but against all the properties Sterling Heights had targeted. The pattern was clear. They recycled the same tactics in the same order every time. It wasn't just harassment. It was a systematic process designed to break down resistance. "This is amazing work, Emma," I said, already texting Jennifer. "This could help show it's an organized criminal enterprise, not just isolated incidents." As we sat there under the stars, I could hear the distant sound of cars on the highway, a reminder that the world was changing around us. But looking At my daughter, seeing her fight for our farm with intelligence and determination, I knew some things would never change, like the strength of family and the importance of standing up for what's right. The zoning board hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, but the real action started the night before. Around midnight, I got a frantic call from Bill Johnson. "Mike, you need to see this," he said. "They've got bulldozers lined up at the county fairgrounds, at least a dozen of them." I immediately called Agent Collins, who was already aware. "We're tracking them," she said. "They've got crews positioned around 3 different farms, including yours. They're planning something big, but we're ready." Jennifer advised us to prepare for anything. "They know they're under investigation," she said. "This is their last chance to either force the development through or destroy enough evidence to avoid prosecution." We spent the night getting ready. Sarah and the kids went to stay with my parents, though Emma insisted on keeping her cameras ready. Local farmers set up a warning system. Anyone spots machinery moving, everyone gets notified. Agent Collins had her teams in position, and Officer Jenkins had every available unit on standby. Dawn broke with an eerie calm. The bulldozers hadn't moved, but something felt off. As I was checking our eastern fence line, I noticed something strange. Several expensive cars parked outside the Sterling Heights clubhouse. Way too early for an HOA meeting. Jennifer called just as I was heading back to the house. "Mike, we've got a problem. Someone leaked the warrant list for tomorrow's federal raids. They know we're coming for their documents." That explained the early morning meeting. They were probably destroying evidence right now. But why the bulldozers? Unless they're going to try to destroy the evidence in our farms at the same time, I realized. If they bulldoze the properties, they can claim any environmental damage was caused by the construction. Agent Collins arrived at our farm just as we spotted the first bulldozer moving. But something was different this time. These weren't regular construction crews. The machines were being operated by those same private security guys from before, now dressed in construction gear. "This isn't construction," Agent Collins said grimly. "This is destruction. They're trying to create enough chaos to cover their tracks." The first bulldozer crashed through our eastern fence like it was made of matchsticks. Behind it, a line of others was heading toward different points of our property. They were trying to cause as much damage as possible before they could be stopped. But we were ready. As soon as the first fence went down, our warning system activated. Within minutes, farm trucks and tractors were converging from all directions. Bill's old F-250 led a convoy of vehicles that cut off the bulldozer's advance from the north. Mary Chen's massive combine harvester blocked the eastern approach. The security guys weren't expecting this kind of resistance. They also weren't expecting the news helicopters that suddenly appeared overhead. Emma had tipped off every media outlet in the state about possible dramatic developments in the story. Agent Collins seized the moment. "Move in now!" she ordered through her radio. Federal agents emerged from concealed positions around Sterling Heights, heading straight for the clubhouse where the executives were meeting. The security teams panicked. Some abandoned their bulldozers right where they were, leaving the engines running. Others tried to push forward, but they were surrounded by farmers who knew every inch of this land and exactly how to defend it. Then something unexpected happened. One of the security team leaders, a guy we'd seen with Wagner before, suddenly started yelling into his radio, "Shut it down! Shut it all down! They've got everything on video!" Emma, my brilliant daughter, had outdone herself. While everyone was watching the bulldozers, she'd positioned small cameras around the property the night before. She'd captured not just the destruction, but the security teams receiving their orders directly from Wagner himself. The scene turned to chaos. Federal agents were leading people out of the Sterling Heights clubhouse in handcuffs. Patricia, Wagner, and about a dozen others we didn't recognize. Local police were arresting the security teams. Abandoned bulldozers sat scattered across the fields like giant yellow monuments to failed corruption. Jennifer arrived as they were leading. Patricia passed us. Gone was the corporate power suit and confident smirk. She looked scared, and with good reason. Agent Collins was reading out charges that carried serious prison time. "You don't understand," Patricia kept saying. "We had agreements. We had guarantees from people in power." "Oh, we understand perfectly," Agent Collins replied. "And we're very interested in hearing about all those agreements. I'm sure the FBI will be too." The damage to our farm was significant, but focused mostly on the eastern edge. The quick response had prevented them from reaching the main fields or any buildings. More importantly, we'd caught them in the act of trying to destroy evidence of their crimes. As the morning progressed, the true scope of what we'd prevented became clear. Similar scenes had played out at 2 other farms. In each case, the community had rallied to stop the destruction. And in each case, Emma's camera network had caught everything. Agent Collins was ecstatic. "This is better than we could have hoped," she said, reviewing the footage. "We've got them on attempted destruction of evidence, conspiracy, vandalism, trespassing, and that's just from this morning." The zoning board hearing was cancelled, obviously. Instead, the county commissioners held an emergency session to begin revoking all of Sterling Heights Development's permits and contracts. The investigation was expanding rapidly as more people came forward with evidence. Jennifer brought us more good news that afternoon. "The judge just approved our request for a permanent injunction," she said. "Not just against construction. They can't come within a mile of any of the targeted farms. And here's the best part. The development corporation's assets have been frozen. They'll be paying for all the damage they caused." The media coverage was intense. Our story was picking up national attention, with reporters focusing on the community's role in stopping corporate corruption. Emma's footage was playing on every major network, and she was being hailed as a young citizen journalist. That evening, as things finally calmed down, our family gathered back at the farm. The damaged fence was temporarily repaired, and volunteers had helped clear the mess left by the bulldozers. We sat on the porch, exhausted but relieved. "I still don't understand something," James said. "Why didn't they just build somewhere else? Why did it have to be our farms?" My father answered, "Because people like that don't just want success. They want to win. Taking our land wasn't just about money, it was about proving they could take whatever they wanted." "But they couldn't," Emma added, still reviewing her footage, "because they didn't understand what they were really fighting against." She was right. They had money, power, and corrupt officials on their side, but we had something stronger, a community united in defense of its values and its way of life. The day after the bulldozer incident, our farm became the unofficial headquarters for what the media was calling Operation Land Grab. Federal agents had commandeered our barn office, turning it into a command center filled with computers, evidence boards, and a constant stream of investigators coming and going. Agent Collins gave us our first real look at what they'd uncovered in the Sterling Heights clubhouse raid. "It's bigger than we thought," she said, spreading documents across our kitchen table. "This wasn't just about your farms. They've been running this scheme across 5 states. The evidence was staggering. Files showed detailed plans for targeting family farms near growing suburban areas. They had a step-by-step playbook. Create fake HOAs, manipulate local officials, harass farmers until they sold, then flip the properties for massive profits. Our farms were just the latest targets in a years-long operation. Jennifer arrived with more revelations. "Look at this," she said, pulling up financial records on her laptop. "Sterling Heights Development isn't even the main company. It's just one branch of a larger corporation called Apex Holdings. And guess who sits on Apex's board?" The names she showed us made my blood run cold. State senators, federal judges, even a former governor. all connected to a network of companies that had been systematically destroying family farms for profit. That's why they were so confident, Agent Collins explained. They thought their connections would protect them, but they didn't count on your daughter's videos going viral. Emma's footage had indeed exploded online. Save Our Farms was trending nationwide, and major news networks were running stories about corporate corruption in rural America. Her careful documentation had become the cornerstone of the federal investigation, but we weren't done yet. Jennifer had organized a team of lawyers representing farmers from multiple states. They were building a class action lawsuit that would make our previous legal actions look tiny in comparison. "We're talking billions in damages," she explained, "not just for property destruction and harassment, but for systematic corruption and RICO violations. Every farm they've targeted, every family they've hurt, they're all going to get justice." While the lawyers and agents worked, our community stayed vigilant. Local farmers maintained their watch rotations, now supplemented by federal protective details. We'd learned the hard way not to underestimate our opponents. That vigilance paid off when someone spotted unusual activity at the county records office late one night. A security camera, one of many Emma had helped install around key locations, caught two men trying to access agricultural zoning files. "They're still trying to destroy evidence," Agent Collins said when she saw the footage. But here's the interesting part. Those men work for a different development company, one that's supposedly competing with Sterling Heights. Further investigation revealed that the competing companies were all connected, part of a larger network designed to create the illusion of market competition while actually coordinating their land grabs. Emma, who'd been allowed to sit in on some of the investigation meetings as a key witness, made an interesting observation. "Look at the dates," she said, pointing to a timeline she'd created. Every time one company failed to get land, another one would try a few months later. They were taking turns. Her observation led to a breakthrough. The investigators discovered that the companies were sharing resources, including the same network of corrupt officials. When one approach failed, they simply rebranded and tried again, wearing down resistant farmers through persistent harassment. The scale of corruption was mind-boggling. Local zoning officials had been bribed to change land classifications. Bank officers had been paid to deny loans to targeted farms. Even some environmental inspectors had been corrupted, fabricating violations to pressure farmers into selling. "This is how they've been getting away with it for so long," Jennifer explained. "They created a system where farmers couldn't get help because every official they turned to was part of the scheme." But their downfall had started with our small community's resistance. By standing together, documenting everything and refusing to give in, we'd exposed a criminal enterprise that had operated unchecked for years. Agent Collins brought in forensic accountants who traced money flowing through dozens of shell companies. They found millions in bribes, kickbacks, and illegal payments. Every discovery led to more arrests, more seized documents, and more corrupt officials facing charges. The investigation even uncovered a secret meeting that had taken place months ago at an expensive resort. There, executives from supposedly competing development companies had gathered to divide up rural territories like modern-day robber barons. They'd marked maps, assigned targets, and planned the systematic destruction of family farms across the country. They called it the Rural Renewal Initiative, Agent Collins said, showing us photos from the meeting. They saw themselves as modernizers, claiming they were improving rural areas. In reality, they were destroying communities for profit. As the evidence mounted, more people came forward. Former employees, disgruntled executives, and even some of the corrupt officials started making deals with prosecutors. The whole house of cards was collapsing. Our farm became a symbol of resistance. Farmers from other states visited to learn how we'd fought back, Journalists came to document what they were calling the Anderson Stand. Even some politicians showed up, though we were careful about who we talked to, given how many officials had been implicated in the scheme. Emma continued updating her documentation, now working with a team of volunteer researchers to connect dots across multiple states. Her methodical approach to gathering and organizing evidence was praised by federal investigators as better than most professional surveillance operations. "You've got a future in investigative journalism, Agent," Collins told her, "or maybe the FBI." One evening, as we reviewed the latest developments with Jennifer and Agent Collins, Sarah asked the question we'd all been thinking: how many farms have they destroyed before us? The answer was heartbreaking. Hundreds of family farms had been lost to this scheme over the years. Some families had taken lowball offers out of desperation. Others had given up after endless harassment and legal pressure. Each story represented a piece of rural America's heritage, erased by corporate greed. "But that stops now," Jennifer said firmly. "The class action lawsuit isn't just about money. We're asking for new laws to protect family farms from corporate takeovers. Your stand here could help save farms across the country." The federal courthouse was packed on the first day of what the media dubbed the Farm Wars trial. Patricia Reynolds, Robert Wagner, and 15 other executives from various development companies sat at multiple defense tables, surrounded by high-priced lawyers. The prosecution's side was led by the U.S. Attorney herself, with Agent Collins, and her team providing support. Our family had front-row seats, along with representatives from other targeted farms across multiple states. The atmosphere was tense. This wasn't just about our farm anymore. This trial would determine the future of family farming in America. The U.S. Attorney's opening statement was devastating. "What we will prove," she began, "is not just a case of harassment or attempted land theft. We will expose a nationwide criminal enterprise designed to systematically destroy family farms for corporate profit." She laid out the evidence methodically. Maps showing targeted farms across 5 states, financial records revealing millions in bribes, and recordings of secret meetings where executives plotted their land grabs. But the most powerful evidence came from Emma's documentation. When they played her videos of the bulldozer attack on the courtroom's giant screens, you could hear gasps from the jury. The footage showed not just the destruction, but the careful planning behind it. Security, teams receiving direct orders, executives coordinating the attacks, all captured in crystal clear detail. "My daughter," I whispered to Sarah, "did all this." Emma sat beside us, taking notes as always. She'd been called as a key witness, and her methodical documentation had become central to the prosecution's case. The defense tried to paint the development companies as legitimate businesses caught in misunderstandings. They claimed the farms were holding back economic progress, that their clients were trying to improve rural communities through modernization. Then came the parade of witnesses. Former employees testified about falsified documents and illegal payoffs. Corrupted officials admitted to taking bribes. Even some of the security team members turned state's evidence, describing how they were ordered to harass and intimidate farmers. But the most dramatic testimony came from Frank, the construction worker who'd first blown the whistle on their fake community center plans. He described years of watching the companies destroy family farms, using his crews to pressure people off their land. "I couldn't take it anymore," he testified. "When I saw them trying to bulldoze the Anderson farm, something just snapped. These people, these farms, they're part of America's backbone, and these executives were treating them like obstacles to be removed." Patricia's testimony was a study in arrogance. She maintained that everything had been legal, that the farmers were simply resistant to progress. But she crumbled under cross-examination when confronted with Emma's videos and the mountain of evidence Agent Collins had gathered. The moment that sealed their fate came when the prosecution played a recording from that secret resort meeting. The executives, thinking they were among friends, had openly discussed their tactics. "These farmers are living in the past," Wagner's voice rang through the courtroom. "They don't matter anymore. We're the future. If they won't sell willingly, we'll make their lives hell until they give up." Jennifer, sitting with us, smiled grimly. "That's game over," she whispered. The defense attorneys tried desperately to exclude evidence, challenge witnesses, and create doubt. But the case Agent Collins and her team had built was too strong. The paper trail of corruption was clear, the witness testimony was damning, and Emma's videos provided undeniable proof of their criminal acts. After 3 weeks of testimony, the case went to the jury. They deliberated for just 6 hours, record time for a case this complex. The verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts. The judge, known for his tough sentences in corruption cases, didn't hold back. Patricia Reynolds, 25 years in federal prison plus 10 million in fines. Robert Wagner, 30 years in prison, 15 million in fines. The other executives received similar sentences. But the judge wasn't done. He ordered the complete dissolution of all companies involved in the scheme. Their assets would be sold off to pay restitution to affected farmers. The corrupt officials who'd helped them faced separate trials and certain prison time. "This case," the judge declared, "represents one of the most egregious examples of corporate corruption I've seen in my 30 years on the bench. The systematic targeting of family farms, the destruction of rural communities, the corruption of public officials. It stops here." After the verdict, the U.S. attorney held a press conference on the courthouse steps. She specifically praised our family's role in exposing the corruption and particularly highlighted Emma's work. "Without the courage of the Anderson family and their community," she said, "without the dedication of a young woman who refused to let injustice go undocumented, this criminal enterprise might still be operating today." The national media coverage was intense. Our story had struck a chord across the country, highlighting the threats facing family farms and the importance of community resistance to corporate overreach. But the real victory came in the changes that followed. Congress fast-tracked new legislation dubbed the Family Farm Protection Act, strengthening protections for agricultural land against corporate takeovers. State legislatures passed similar laws. Our stand had helped create lasting change. Back at the farm, life slowly returned to normal. The damaged fields were replanted, the fences rebuilt. The federal agents packed up their command center in our barn, though Agent Collins still stopped by regularly. She'd become part of our extended farm family. Emma's documentation had grown into something bigger. She started a website helping other farmers document and resist corporate pressure tactics. Her work was being used to train law enforcement agencies in recognizing patterns of organized harassment. The class action lawsuit Jennifer had organized was settled for billions. Every family that had lost land to the scheme received compensation, though money couldn't truly replace what they'd lost. More importantly, the settlement included funds to help preserve and protect family farms across the country. That evening, after the verdict, our community gathered for a celebration in our barn. Farmers who'd stood with us, lawyers who'd fought. For us, agents who'd protected us, everyone who'd played a part in our victory was there. Just when we thought the battle was over, Sterling Heights and their corporate allies launched one final desperate attack that nobody saw coming. It started with a series of anonymous letters to every major media outlet in the country, claiming our farm was involved in a massive organic certification fraud scheme. The allegations were ridiculous, claiming we were secretly using banned pesticides, falsifying soil tests, and deceiving customers about our organic practices. But the letters included doctored photos and fake test results that looked convincing enough to make headlines. Our phones started ringing off the hook, with reporters asking for comments. "This is their revenge play," Jennifer said during an emergency meeting in our kitchen. "They're trying to destroy your reputation since they couldn't take your land." Agent Collins was furious. "They're getting desperate. Our investigation found a company called Media Solutions Group registered last week. Guess who owns it? Wagner's wife." The attack was sophisticated. Fake social media accounts started sharing exposé videos about our farm. Online review sites were flooded with obviously false claims about food safety violations. Someone even created a fake website that looked like our farm's official page, filled with false information and doctored images. Emma, our family's digital detective, traced the campaign back to a network of offshore servers and shell companies. "They're trying to hide their tracks," she explained, "but they're using the same patterns as before. Look at the timing of the posts. It's automated, just like their previous harassment campaigns." But our opponents had made a crucial mistake. In their rush to discredit us, they'd forged organic certification documents, and that got the attention of federal agricultural investigators. "Falsifying USDA organic certificates is a federal crime," Agent Collins explained. "And guess what? The fake certificates they created used the same template we found on Wagner's laptop during the raid." The investigation quickly uncovered an elaborate scheme. Wagner's team had set up a network of fake organic testing labs, complete with websites and phone numbers. They'd even hired actors to pose as inspectors if anyone called to verify the false claims. Jennifer was already preparing our legal response when we got unexpected help from an unlikely source. Patricia Reynolds's personal assistant, facing her own legal troubles, decided to cooperate with investigators. She provided emails showing the entire smear campaign had been planned even before the trial as a backup plan if they lost. They called it Operation Scorched Earth, Agent Collins said, reading from the emails. "Their goal was to destroy not just your farm, but the credibility of every farmer who testified against them. But our community wasn't about to let that happen. Local customers who'd known our family for years started posting their own videos, showing their visits to our farm and vouching for our organic practices. Other farmers organized tours of their properties, demonstrating how real organic farming worked. Emma had an idea that turned the tide. "Why don't we live stream our entire farming operation?" she suggested. "Show people everything we do. Prove we have nothing to hide." We set up cameras across the farm, broadcasting our daily operations live on the internet. Viewers could watch us working in real time, see our organic practices in action, and ask questions about our methods. The transparency campaign was a huge hit. Our viewer count shot up as people became fascinated with authentic family farming. The media narrative quickly shifted. Instead of questioning our practices, reporters started investigating the source of the allegations. They uncovered the fake testing labs, traced the anonymous letters, and exposed the coordinated nature of the attacks. But our opponents had one last card to play. They hired a team of private investigators to follow our delivery trucks, hoping to catch us bringing in non-organic supplies. Instead, they accidentally exposed their own operation when one of their investigators got into an accident with a truck full of surveillance equipment and documents linking back to Sterling Heights. The final blow came when the FBI raided Media Solutions Group's offices. They found a complete digital warfare operation, banks of computers running fake social media accounts, teams creating doctored photos and videos, and detailed plans for destroying the reputations of dozens of family farms. Wagner's wife was arrested trying to board a private jet to a non-extradition country. In her laptop, investigators found emails to Wagner in prison, updating him on their revenge campaign. Those emails violated his court restrictions and added years to his sentence. The exposure of Operation Scorched Earth led to new federal investigations. Prosecutors discovered that similar smear campaigns had been used against other farmers who'd resisted corporate takeovers. Each case followed the same pattern: false allegations, forged documents, and coordinated media attacks. Jennifer helped us file a new lawsuit, this time for defamation and criminal conspiracy. But more importantly, she worked with agricultural organizations to create a rapid response network for farmers facing similar attacks. They thought they could silence us with lies, she said during a press conference. Instead, they've helped create a nationwide system to protect family farms from corporate intimidation. Emma's live stream idea evolved into a regular series about life on an organic farm. Schools started using our broadcasts in their agriculture classes. People from around the world tuned in to watch real farming in action, learning about sustainable agriculture and the importance of family farms. The failed smear campaign actually strengthened our position in the farming community. Other organic farmers started copying our transparency model, creating a network of live streaming farms that showed the world the truth about sustainable agriculture. Sometimes, my father said, watching viewers' comments pour in on Emma's latest broadcast, your enemy's worst attacks become your greatest opportunities. Agent Collins brought us one final piece of news. The investigation into the smear campaign had uncovered evidence of similar operations against environmental groups, labor unions, and small businesses that had opposed corporate interests. Your case has opened up a whole new front in the fight against corporate corruption, she explained. We're not just protecting farms anymore, we're exposing a nationwide network of corporate disinformation campaigns. The transformation that followed our victory wasn't just about saving one farm. It sparked a revolution in how communities protect themselves against corporate overreach. 1 year after the failed smear campaign, our farm had become something we never expected: a training center for the next generation of agricultural defenders. It started with Emma's livestream project. What began as a way to prove our organic practices evolved into a full-fledged educational platform. Farmers from across the country started visiting to learn not just about farming, but about protecting their land from corporate takeovers. The Anderson Protocol, that's what they started calling our documentation system. Emma's methods for tracking corporate harassment and gathering evidence became a blueprint for threatened communities. She even developed a smartphone app, working with tech-savvy farmers' kids from other states, helping rural families document and report suspicious activities around their properties. Jennifer turned our case into a teaching tool for law schools, showing future lawyers how to defend family farms against corporate tactics. She regularly hosted workshops in our barn, teaching farmers about their legal rights and how to recognize early signs of corporate targeting. Knowledge is the best defense, she'd tell them. These corporations rely on farmers not knowing their rights. We're changing that, one workshop at a time. Agent Collins took our story to law enforcement agencies nationwide, training officers to recognize patterns of corporate harassment. Our case had exposed how companies used local authorities against farmers. Now those same authorities were becoming our strongest allies. But the real change happened in Sterling Heights itself. After the development corporation's collapse, the residents were left with an HOA in shambles and a community divided. That's when something unexpected happened. They reached out to us for help. The new HOA president, Michael Chen, Mary's son who'd grown up on a neighboring farm, proposed a revolutionary idea: turning Sterling Heights into a model of suburban-rural cooperation. The fancy clubhouse Patricia had planned, it became a farmers' market where local growers could sell directly to suburban families. The community center they'd tried to build on our land, the residents voted to create it on their own property. Instead, with a focus on agricultural education, Now suburban kids learn about farming through hands-on programs run by local farmers. Even the pristine lawns that had once been Sterling Heights' pride underwent a transformation. Working with local agricultural experts, residents started converting their yards into small organic gardens. The HOA that once fined people for overgrown grass now gives awards for the most productive vegetable gardens. "This is what real community development looks like," Michael Chen told a reporter. "Not pushing people out, but bringing them together." Our farm expanded its educational programs. Sarah started teaching organic farming classes to suburban families. James, inspired by the community's interest, developed a junior farmers program that brings kids from the city to experience farm life firsthand. The federal investigation's findings led to lasting policy changes. Congress passed the Rural Community Protection Act, requiring extensive public review before any large-scale development could displace agricultural land. States followed with their own laws strengthening farmers' rights. Emma's documentation became part of the FBI's training curriculum for investigating corporate fraud. She was invited to speak at law enforcement conferences, sharing her methods for tracking systematic harassment. At 17, she became the youngest person ever to receive the National Family Farm Coalition's Defender of Rural America Award. The corporate executives who tried to destroy us? They watched these changes from their prison cells. Patricia Reynolds wrote a confession letter, finally admitting the full scope of their operation. Her testimony helped expose similar schemes in other states, saving dozens of farms from corporate takeovers. Frank, the construction worker who'd first blown the whistle, started a non-profit helping other construction workers recognize and report illegal development tactics. "You can build new things," he'd say, "without destroying what matters." One day, about 2 years after everything started, I found Emma sitting on our porch updating her farm defense app. The sunset painted our fields golden, and in the distance, you could see the Sterling Heights gardens blooming. "Did you ever think," she asked, "that trying to save our farm would change so many lives?" I hadn't. We'd just been fighting to protect our heritage, our way of life. But in standing up to corporate bullies, we'd helped create something bigger than ourselves, a movement that was transforming communities across America. Today, our farm still grows organic crops, raises heritage grains, and supplies local restaurants. But it's also become a symbol of something more, the power of communities to stand together against corporate greed, and the unexpected ways that fighting for what's right can bring people together. The Anderson Farm story isn't just about saving a piece of land. It's about showing that when people unite to protect what matters, they can create positive change that ripples far beyond their own fences. If this story inspired you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and notification bell. You won't want to miss our upcoming videos about other communities standing up for what's right. Up next, we've got 2 more incredible stories of people fighting back against corporate bullies. Click the videos on your screen to discover how a small town saved their historic district from demolition and how a group of fishermen protected their harbor from industrial development. Drop a comment below if your community has ever come together to fight for what's right. Your stories inspire others to take a stand. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the biggest changes start with one family refusing to back down.